Hi, this is Jack Stanley, and I wanted to talk about listening to records with Franco Corelli. Now, Franco Corelli was a famous, well known, amazing operatic tenor and had a remarkable career. And, he was all over the world performing, known as the best tenor in tights. But you know something? It was my fortune later in life to get to know him and spend time with him when he was in his 70s. And many of us would get together. There was a couple of us. There was Jerome Hines, Franco Corelli, Mrs. Corelli, and dog, don't forget that. And myself and sometimes a few other folks would get together and we'd sit there and talk about recordings. And often I would bring an early phonograph and I would bring recordings of all of the great opera singers of the beginning of the 20th century. And we would gather together in a herd and we would listen to the various recordings. And I watched Jerry and I'd watch Franco and their response to a recording. And I remember watching Jerry one time. He was listening to a recording and he was like, oh, like, this is dreadful. I'm not going to say who the singer was, but he didn't like them very much. And Corelli would sit down and he would listen. And then he'd start singing with the record sometimes if he was in the mood. I always remember I put on a recording of Caruso. And Caruso was singing, was it A la Luna with, what was his name? Diga Gorza? And so Corelli started singing along with Caruso when he was singing it. It was really kind of cool to listen to Caruso and Corelli sing together, and two of some of the greatest tenors of the 20th century. And we used to say that Caruso had a beautiful, sad sound. And sometimes he would listen and he would just kind of put his head forward into his hands and listen. And I put on recordings of Tetrazzini, and he loved Tetrazzini. He couldn't get enough Tetrazzini. He said that's the most amazing soprano voice he had ever heard. And he had sung with, all the greats. But he loved the voice of the recorded Tetrazzini, because he didn't hear Tetrazzini either, because Tetrazzini, was pretty much over with by the time he was about 10 years old. And the other thing is, we would put on recordings of various singers. We put on Patti, and I wasn't exactly enthralled with that. Neither was Hines. And he said they're very early recordings, and she was up in her years, and they were discussing that wasn't a smart move. I put Tamagno on, and they were extremely impressed with the singing of Tamagno. And often, when I would be with them and we'd be doing this, and I'd have the record, I would take a China clay pencil and I would write their comments on the back of the record. I've got about 20 or 30 recordings here in my collection in which I wrote down the comments of Corelli and Hines. And every once in a while, Robert Merrill would come and talk and join them and whatever. And it's a fascinating, interesting thing. And it was a great and remarkable treat for me. I cannot believe how fortunate I was to be kind of like in their little circle. And they kind of looked over me and taught me, and not to sing, they realized I was a lost cause, but just to be friends. And it was wonderful because I would get phone calls from Franco and I get calls from Jerry. And, one day I was going to get a job singing, and Franco had asked me to come to the opera with him. I mean, I would have loved that. But I was a day I was booked to sing. I'd signed contracts to sing at that time. And he dropped the phone down. He said, "Bravo, bravo, bravo." And so I got 4 bravos from Franco Corelli, which I was very happy about. and But I got to spend some wonderful times with them and have great dinners, and we'd sit down and have grand conversations. And they're all gone now for a long time. This is the year 2000. They've been gone 17 years. God, seems like yesterday. But they were great, remarkable artists and good friends. And as I said, I was a very lucky person to have people who loved the stuff I loved and loved to listen to a lot of this stuff. And of course, Jerry taught me to snorkel in his pool. And he said, "You've given me years of life because you're making me do this kind of stuff to teach you." And I was so happy about that because I wanted him to live a very long life. And Franco Corelli, I would take him and we'd go for drives, and he would sit there and yell, "Jack is the king of New Jersey." It was so fun. I missed them. I truly, truly miss them. But I treasure the time we got to spend together. And I want to share that. It was a remarkable period of time. And I have to dig out some of these records with the comments. I mean, I played Over There by Caruso for Corelli, and he listened. He says, "His English is better than mine." and of course, Hines would listen and he would get into the techniques. And then Corelli and Hines would argue. Oh, they could argue about the voice. One would say that you need to have a voice to begin with. One could say you could be trained to have a voice. And I let them argue, often in Italian. And and when they were done, they would turn back and smile, and then we'd get back to our conversation. Great memories from a long